This is Spirit Gym. Have you considered what you would do if you went from being a renowned chef, television presenter, author, and speaker to being completely cancelled and dropped by your publisher and TV show? How would you handle it? In this episode, we hear from Pete Evans, who has experienced just that over the past 4 years and is back on the podcast talking with Paul about everything from cancel culture, spiritual nutrition, and raising healthy kids to sci-fi fiction, goat curry, and Pete's latest cookbook. Before diving into this episode, we'd just like to say thank you for listening to this podcast, which would not be possible without you, our subscribers, and also our premier sponsors, Organifi, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, and Wild Pastures. You can find the special offers and discounts from the sponsors throughout this episode, or visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast with my buddy Pete Evans. Pete is a friend of mine and former guest on the podcast. He's one of the world's most famous chefs and activists for truth, freedom, human rights, health, and children's health. He is the author of over a dozen books on diet and health, and his latest and very important timely book, Healthy Food for Healthy Kids, 120 simple, nourishing, gluten-free, dairy-free recipes the whole family will love, is out now. You can find it easily on Amazon. Pete, it's great to have you back.
Paul, I love you, brother, and thank you for having me on, and g'day to everybody that's watching and listening. Stoked to be here.
So I kind of scanned through my podcast about 4.5 years since you've been on the podcast. What have you been up to since then, and what's important in your life right now?
Well, that's a big question. And,
it's 4.5 years big. It's pandemic long. We know you went through hell over even just having me on your podcast.
I wouldn't say it was hell. I think it was a beautiful adventure.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good way to frame it. Well,
life is a beautiful adventure, and all of these periods of our existence, opportunities for us to lean in to all of it, who we are, what we're here to do, whatever that may be. And
that's part of the journey, is figuring that out. Fortunately, I did that a long time ago.
And so to answer your question, the last 4 years, my wife and I have been running a beautiful little wellness retreat in the hinterland of far north New South Wales, which sort of is just below the Queensland border. So beautiful weather. We have 200 acres of this pristine rainforest, very ancient spring water that flows through. So we invite 8 perfect strangers to spend a weekend with us, usually 3 out of 4 weekends over the last 4 years. And it's been a beautiful experience, from going from somebody with a large profile seen by millions of people and speaking on stage to thousands of people, to having this quite a beautiful cocoon.
Good. You probably needed it.
Not only myself and my wife, but also for our guests. It's been a wonderful journey, because we didn't know what it would be like to run a retreat and have strangers stay with us. And I don't like to use the word strangers, but people that we don't know, but we quickly form a close bond with. And over the last 4 years, we've ran cooking retreats where we teach 25 recipes over a weekend, which is interactive with the guests. We also run fasting retreats, which is at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is a little quirky, because as a chef, people are expecting to come to get food from a chef.
You can do imaginary meals.
Well, we do offer a nice broth if they choose to have it. Mm-hmm. And we do men's retreats, women's retreats, breathwork retreats, Pilates, yoga retreats. We sort of do the gamut of what keeps us interested as well, and give variety to the guests as well, so they can pick and choose what would suit them. Some love the cooking, some love the fasting, some just like to be nourished in a wellness space and have some body work. And my wife serves a beautiful ancient Tibetan tea ceremony service. And,
great.
so profound, so beautiful, and so simple, And I think that's where I guess life is. We've manifested this very simple existence, and trying to, I guess, boil down the essence of what it means to have long-term regenerative health instead of it being too complicated. Let's just go back to basic, simple solutions as often as we can. As I
Amen
said,
to that.
nature, fasting, good food, great water, connection, sitting around the campfire, telling stories and sharing stories, and contemplation, meditation, breathing.
Yeah.
Most of these things are free. The best medicines are for free.
Free and far less engaged today than ever, sadly. Now, just for the guests that, because our podcast is listened to in 171 countries, so a lot of people may not know where New South Wales is. It's in Australia. Where do people go if they want to engage the possibility of learning more about these retreats and maybe booking one with you?
On my website,
which is
peteevans.com. And we've got an Instagram page and a Telegram page as well. Chef Pete Evans, if anyone wants to tune into that. I keep Instagram very separate. The information that I share on Instagram is very different than what I share on Telegram. Telegram is more the sort of geopolitics of the world and the news side of things, whereas Instagram is a little bit more, or a lot more inspirational without going down those rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Pick your audience for the desired outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's been a great journey, and then we've just released this beautiful new book. I haven't published a book in 5 years, and
You've published a lot of books, though, man. I was looking on Amazon. I didn't realize you'd written so many. You must have a tremendously good endurance in your typing hands.
I do. It was one of the skills that I picked up at high school. I was in year 7 or year 8, and one of the electives was typing. And this is going back, I'm 52 this year, so going back nearly 40 years. And it was one of the best subjects I did at school, learning how to type, because it's kept me really fast at doing these types of things. But I've released 30 cookbooks over the last 15 or so years. 20 really based on dietary principles. The first 10, give or take, were more restaurant style before I discovered nutritional health. But the last 20 being great. I co-authored 3 with Dr. McCullough over in the States.
Oh, yeah,
which is pretty cool. Yeah. And then this latest one's with Children's Health Defense.
Oh, good. I think I saw something on Children's Health Defense mentioning that at one point along the way.
Yeah, so Bobby Kennedy Jr., I asked him, how do we put a book together with Children's Health Defense? So he joined the dots and made the connections for me with Skyhorse Publishing, Tony Lyons, because Skyhorse is pretty much the only publisher out there that deals with people that are being cancelled.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's great to know.
Skyhorse is a good name.
Yeah, that's great.
The horse is a symbol of freedom, symbolically.
Yeah. So Tony Lyons is the CEO of that and founder of Skyhorse, and he did Bobby's book, The Real Anthony Fauci. And so we set that up with Children's Health Defense. I think this is the first cookbook that Children's Health Defense has done. And it's so timely.
Yeah, totally.
It is so timely to be able to re-enter the publishing world at this particular time, with Bobby going through his transition into his role.
Yes.
And coming out of the last 4 or 5 years, there's going to be we're witnessing so much inflammation in the world, through not only the food that we're eating, but overuse of pharmaceuticals and antibiotics, and obviously the shots, are causing inflammation. So what are the simple solutions to this? And, there's so many detox protocols that are out there. But I think the lowest hanging fruit is always, let's get our diet humming in a way that we reduce inflammation in the body so that the body can go and do what it's meant to do, which is get to a place of
thrive.
Yeah, homeostasis, if you want to go that terminology, but let it do what it wants to do, and it's meant to do, which is keep us around for as long as possible.
Well, the thing that people forget is the body's got 4.9 billion years of wisdom in it, if you look at it from an evolutionary perspective. And most people don't realize that modern medicine and most of what we do is very inferior to what the body can do all by itself if it's just given the right resources. And I think the big, huge deficit that I see in my work and have for over 40 years is that people just don't pay attention to their bodies. They think that they need to do things to their body instead of engaging and living with their body and, knowing that it's talking to you all the time. There's a reason you got bags under your eyes or discoloration or inflammation or a swollen belly or chronic neck pain or back pain, or you can't pee or you can't poop or you're peeing too much or pooping. All of it is the body's talking to you. And all you're going to do is just develop a relationship with it and pay attention and say, okay, what did I do in the last 24 hours that's different than what I was doing before? Oh, well, I had a Haagen-Dazs ice cream and here I am, got pimples all over my face. Well, maybe you'd better stop the Haagen-Dazs, for God's sakes. Try something else.
It's pretty simple.
It is simple. It's mind-boggling. People pay me a lot of money to teach them stuff that, their mother and father should have taught them.
And I think that's where, we have been and we're going through that period of disconnection.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but we could generalize and say the Western societies lost that connection to, as you said, listening to the body, but also to nature and our relationship to nature. And I often believe that that the path forward is to look back.
Look, I'll show you something. Speaking of that,
please do.
I was given this beautiful gourd by a friend.
Wow!
It's a handmade gourd by native Indians, and I believe somewhere here in California. But each morning when I do my prayers, I blow smoke to this, and I say thank you to all the native cultures in the world for bringing your native wisdom into consciousness at this time so we can find harmony between humanity and Mother Nature and live and love fully together. And so that's my symbol for cultivating native wisdom in a modern time.
And that hits the nail on the head, I believe, is, ancient wisdom, bringing it in to now.
Yeah.
And, I'm also not averse to modern technology either.
It's just got to be used intelligently. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people I say people all the time, a phone is like a mind. It makes a far better tool than a master.
Correct.
And that's where people get lost, right there on both ends. In their mind, they get lost in, and their phone, they get lost in, and neither of those leads to holism. Yeah,
it's a tool. And it depends the way you use the tool. Like I've got social media and my Instagram, the people that I follow on Instagram are mainly chefs and surfers and skiers and because I like that inspiration. Mm-hmm. Seeing different recipes from these chefs from all around the world, it keeps me on my toes in this industry, because I've been in this industry for 30 years. And when you think you know it all, that's when life,
you're dead.
Life gives you some pretty powerful lessons to reframe that belief. So
I don't think anyone, though, Pete, that really is an honest student ever has that problem. I don't know about you, but the more I learn, the bigger my questions get, the deeper I have to go into myself and into my own library or research to find the answers. And so I find that the event horizon of knowledge is forever moving away from you as you move towards it, just like any horizon. I'm as passionate about my learning and my inner growth work and studies today, 41 years into my career, as I ever was. When I see people think they know it all, it's usually a disease of the ego, and it's often a lack of spiritual discipline, spiritual courage, and also intellectual laziness, because when you think you know it all, you stop learning. Now you have a belief system and it's closed. You think, I know. And that closes the circle. And then you become a fossil, but you think you're current.
Very true. Very true.
Spring has sprung here in the Northern Hemisphere, and now is the time for you to take the next step in your growth as a health or fitness professional. Or maybe you've been considering changing careers and becoming a fitness or lifestyle coach. I have some great news for you. The Chek Institute Spring Sale is coming May 9th to 18th, and you can save big on all their in-person advanced training programs. The holistic lifestyle coaching and integrated movement science programs are gold standard courses in the industry, created by Paul Chek and taught by his personally selected team of Chek faculty. Held at locations across the globe, you'll receive hands-on training from teachers who actually practice what they preach. And from May 9th to 18th only, you can save with free prerequisite packages, added bonuses, steep discounts, as well as payment plan options. To explore the dates and locations for the Chek Institute's in-person advanced training programs, go to chek.group/spring sale. Don't delay though, as seats are limited at each course, and when they are sold out, the course registration closes. So go now to chek.group/spring sale.
Yeah, the last few years I've been reading science fiction books.
Oh, yeah.
Frank Herbert's Dune series, Isaac Asimov's books on the robot series and Foundation series, and the list goes on. And I'm just curious about this particular point that we're in right now, when AI is entering the space, robotics are entering the space. So again, looking backwards, and I love Asimov's books because they don't give a definitive answer of where robotics and AI will take us. He ponders the question over decades of his prolific writing and gives all of these different narratives. They do have the doomsday narrative in there, but overwhelmingly what I've noticed about his work is that robots, in his perception, and AI are just another tool that can be used for the growth of humanity if used in the right way. And I find it fascinating because before I was reading this, I was in that sort of skeptical state of mind of what is this? And I didn't have enough information to base an opinion on, and I probably still don't. But it's really nice to look back to see what some of these pioneers were thinking nearly a century ago about where these things will lead. And obviously Frank Herbert's Dune series paints a really beautiful picture, 30,000 years into the future, where they used AI and robotics, or robots, computers and machines, until they got to the point where it was like, we don't need that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They serve their purpose. We use that tool, and now it's like we're back into the next phase of human evolution. So it's given me a more grounded, different perspective, instead of going into a state of fear about everything that seems to be coming at us. Instead of like, can we harmonize with these tools in a way that can be beautiful? And obviously, like plant medicines and psychedelics, they could be disrespected, as you're aware. So we just have to look at these tools, and no doubt some people will disrespect or take advantage of these tools in maybe not so good ways. But I that's the human existence, isn't it? We have to go through it to find out what works.
That's the polarity that drives consciousness. It'll always be there. It always has been. It's the only way God can come to know itself. Speaking of Isaac Asimov, was that not just one deep son of a bitch?
Oh, yeah.
Fucking hell, man. He wrote, 500 books or something crazy?
500. He was born in Russia, I believe, and moved to Brooklyn when he was 3 with his parents. And I think he was a chemistry professor at Bronx or Brooklyn University, and then he was just fascinated by science fiction and just started, as you said, 500 pieces plus PhDs and becoming a professor.
I know.
The body of work,
I've got to
take my hat off to him, 30 cookbooks compared to 500 novels. Wow.
It's crazy. I mean, I've looked into him. I've got several of his books. I've read several of his books, and one of the books I have in my library, which you'd probably be surprised that Isaac Asimov wrote. It's a big book too. It's probably 500 pages. It's on interpreting the Bible.
Yep. Yeah, I haven't read that one yet.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't read it page by page. I kind of use it as a reference tool because I'm just curious what his, way of interpreting the Bible is, because, that can go a lot of different and interesting ways. But I've always found him very, pretty wise, really. Like, the guy's like, talk about a guy that retained his imagination and childhood kind of mind for exploring. I'm just like, man, Isaac Asimov's a badass dude. I wish I could have met that guy.
Yeah,
I'd love to do mushrooms with him. Just turn the tape recorder on,
Yeah, and that's, having sat with different entheogenic medicines over the years, and then reading something like the Dune series, or Dune, as you would say here in America, the spice obviously is the driving factor of that book, how they use it for expanding consciousness, but also as a tool for space travel and this, that, and the other. And, when they go on this journey when they have the hero dose, to become either the Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit, or, as Paul Atreides does, become the God King.
What's a hero's dose, by the way?
It's where they basically, it's like I interpret it like a hero dose of toad medicine, where you dissolve the ego into the all, and you get the wisdom of infinite source information.
Been there many times.
Oh yeah. me too. Yeah. It's a beautiful experience.
It is.
It's profound. It's a lot to then bring into your waking life, which I'm still, however many years later, still processing and still discovering the nuggets from those experiences.
One way to keep the ego healthy is to explode it.
Exactly.
Then you got to put it back together, and you get to say, do I really want this in here or not?
Yeah, and that's, and we know that Frank Herbert did sit with different medicines over his time, different psychedelics, to create his vision of this tremendous series, or this tremendous work, very much like Tolkien's work. It was written over 20 or 30 years, 2 or 3 decades, to bring that to the fore. And it's so relevant now. And often people say, what's the best spiritual book you've ever read? And I'm like, Dune is up there.
Is that right?
June's up there. Yeah, it's just profound. Every page seemed to really resonate with me. And he was also a script writer, I think back in the day, for the Democrat Party or the Republican Party. I'm not sure which one. So how he entwines politics into this novel, and greed, control, power, religion, spirituality. It's definitely a tome for the ages, that's for sure.
That's cool. What inspired you to write your new book, Healthy Food for Healthy Kids? I mean, I can certainly guess, but there must have been something that pushed you over the edge. And, because just to give you an example, when the day COVID started, I'd been working on Spirit Gym for like 10 years, and all these notebooks behind me, those are all my notes from all my research. And the day the lockdown started, I just said, that's it. I got to get Spirit Gym out, because people, based on the number of people rushing to get vaccinated, we got a serious problem of mind control going on, and I need to help people. And so that was it. I went hell bent for leather, and, the whole Mastery Group training program's alive. Volume 1's about to come out now. It's 15 volumes, so it's massive. It's over 3,000 pages. But so anyhow, the point was that was the moment that I just got Humpty Dumpty, fell off the wall, and said, let's get on the ball, baby. So what was the tipping point for you? What made you step up to the plate and put this thing out?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I think Bobby Kennedy has been a catalyst for this book, but also my resurgence into this space as well. And especially in the United States. The United States is so, I believe, the key of the planet. It's the country that really sends the ripples through the
For
rest of the
better or
world.
worse?
Well, both, both, but definitely things change when things change in the States.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Well,
we feel them in Australia, and Australia, as you know, is quite. I want to be careful with my words here, but I'll just use the word a little bit backward, a little bit behind on what happens here. So this seems to be the catalyst for change, especially at this time. Trump, Kennedy, we are witnessing, in my perception, some pretty radical changes. And
thank the Lord.
Whatever you think of Trump, and I've always seen him as a catalyst for change. For good, for bad, I don't know. I don't like to play in those realms of judgment of good or bad, but I just see that as a catalyst. So I've been fascinated about Trump for the last 8 years.
He's been surprising the hell out of me since he became president. He's doing a lot better than I thought he would. I think he learned a lot from his first presidency and then from getting run over the coals by everybody that was trying to get rid of him. I think it just inspired him to, say a giant fuck you to those people and say, he's obviously got a winner's spirit. Like, he's not the kind of guy you can pin once and think that it's over,
No, I was at Mar-a-Lago just this last weekend. I was invited there for a dinner.
Oh, cool.
And Trump was there, just sitting a couple of tables away from us. And Elon Musk was there, James O'Keefe from Project Veritas that he used to have. It was pretty surreal, sort of being just observing that whole, like a king's court, so to speak.
Totally.
And maybe there was 200 people there for dinner, and I got to shake Trump's hand as he was leaving, and he gave me the look,
Yeah.
And he is an imposing figure, and I don't say that in a negative way or a positive way, but he definitely has a strong personality that you can tap into and feel when you're in his presence. And it was just great to witness,
He's clearly an alpha male. There's no question,
I was like, "G'day, mate. Thanks for everything you're doing." He's like, "Sweet."
Yeah.
Yeah. But going back to Kennedy being the catalyst, and when he put his hand up to run for president, I was like, this is a win-win.
Totally.
Whether it's Bobby, whether it's Trump. And I had this inkling in the back of my mind when that happened, will they come together to form a partnership in one way or another? And potentially one of the things I've seen in my intuition is perhaps the deal was done for him to join Trump to get this through. And
I think so.
For Kennedy maybe to run for the next
I wouldn't
round.
doubt it at all. Kennedy keeps himself in good shape, so he won't be too old by any means.
So the reason for the book was it just felt like the right time, and with my connection with Bobby over the years, and then him basically helping me get it up and launched with Children's Health Defence, it felt like I'd been in hibernation a little bit for 4 or 5 years into my cocoon through COVID because I was cancelled. And as I said, my wife and I ran a wellness retreat. Before that, I was on television screens and quite a public figure.
Yeah.
And now it feels like I've gone through that process, and now I'm re-entering into this space to bring, I guess, my experience and talents and skills in the cooking space, because I do believe that, as I said earlier, cooking and food, I believe, is one of the lowest hanging fruits for long-term regenerative health that doesn't need to be complicated, as long as people understand why. The why, because over the last 3-4 decades, we've had institutions such as the Dietetics Institutions or Dietitians Australia, and out of that came the Dietary Guidelines, which has infiltrated and manipulated and brainwashed the public into thinking or believing what is healthy to eat for them. And there's been enough documentaries, including my own called The Magic Pill, which exposed how much conflict of interest there are in those industries, whether it be the dietetics, whether it be big pharma, big medicine, agriculture, the list goes on, political lobbying, blah, 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 multinational food corporations. And so I see this right now, the next 4 years, there's going to be a really good case for the dietary guidelines to change. And then what comes from that. Because in our country, if you go to daycare, if you go to school, jail, hospital, go to the doctor, go to the dietitian, they're all pushing this very upside down health information, which I believe is the biggest criminal organization or criminal act that has ever perpetrated on the Western public, the dietary guidelines, because we know they cause inflammation, we know they make people sick,
and poison people.
Yeah, and then reliant on that pharma medical system for the rest of your life, subscription-based medicine, as some like to call it. So I just see this as a pivotal point with Bobby in there and others in there, Jay Bhattacharya and others all coming together. And I think last time, maybe we spoke about this last time, but I believe COVID has given us the opportunity to bring all of these quite diverse people that were probably in their own lane before, in their own, stuck in their, dare I say, ego or their profession. But what COVID has done, in my belief, is brought all these very interesting, intelligent, heart-open people that spoke out during COVID and bringing them together into this beautiful recipe. They're the ingredients for this recipe for change, for humanity. And we're witnessing that now. I never know the timeline or expectation of things to flow out. So the broth is brewing with these beautiful individuals like yourself and the people you have on the podcast.
Yeah.
And they're all coming together. And my analogy is that over the coming years or decades, the information is going to become so intoxicating to people that they'll be smelling it and then they'll want a taste of it, because they won't be able to resist, because nothing feels as good as being healthy.
Hi, everybody. My family and I love Organifi's green juices. You can get your green juice in 2 excellent flavors, crisp apple and original mint. Not only are these products made with certified organic ingredients to support your family's nutritional needs, they each have some unique benefits. Your green juice crisp apple eases stress with an effective dose of 600 milligrams of ashwagandha per serving. Helps reduce cortisol spikes that increase snacking urges and aids keeping your blood sugar balanced. Why snack on inferior foods that lack nutrition and often lead to blood sugar spikes followed by blood sugar crashes when Organifi's green juices are super healthy, taste great, and are as quick to make as opening the package and adding water. Your green juice crisp apple is made from fresh apples picked right off the branch and are packed with micronutrients to support your body's needs. Green Juice Original Mint contains ashwagandha, chlorella, and spirulina. Reset your body every morning with 11 detoxifying superfoods. You'll love the delicious taste and your body will feel strong and stable with all the micronutrients in each serving. Green Juice Original Mint promotes balanced cortisol and stress levels, perfect for weight management, and helps rid the body of harmful toxins. Personally, I'm super grateful that Organifi makes such excellent, easy-to-use drinks and foods that keep us energized, healthy, and clean inside while decreasing the urge to crave on inferior snack foods. My kids love both flavors, and I love knowing that we can all be healthy together with Organifi's excellent crisp apple and original mint green juices. These products are excellent for work, on the road, sharing with friends, and anytime you need a nutritious boost that tastes good. To get your crisp apple and original mint green juices, go to Organifi.com/Chek20. That's Organifi.com/Chek20. Save 20% on your purchase using the code Chek20, all caps, on checkout. Don't worry if you forget your Living 4D discount code, because you'll see it right there on the landing page. Enjoy Organifi's excellent green juices.
Well, there's a big divide being created, and I've been watching this divide grow throughout my career. When I started as a therapist, I was 22. I was a trainer of the Army boxing team. So I started as a trainer in January 1984. And at that time, a fit person like I was, as a competitive fighter, I'd go out into the public and occasionally you'd see someone that was fat or, obviously not healthy. But in general, you walk through a crowd and people seemed fairly normal. But as the years have gone by, we take the kids to Legoland, the girls take them to Disneyland. They always come back and say, oh my God, you would not believe how unbelievably sick people are at Disneyland and seriously obese and in wheelchairs and even kids that are just in bad shape. And I see it at Legoland. And so my point is now when a healthy person goes out into the public, it's obvious who's living a different lifestyle than the majority of the people. And I think it's like anything, people can only go so far down the unhealthy rabbit hole before they start wondering, how do I get out of this? I don't feel good. And so they see a Pete Evans walk by or sitting next to them in an airplane or, a Chek professional or whatever. And they're start asking questions. And that's the flirtation that leads to the foreplay, that leads to the transformation. And so I think, strangely enough, that the polarization of the healthy and the unhealthy is, the greater the polarity you have in an electromagnetic circuit, the stronger the magnetism you generate. Mm-hmm. And I think, strangely, the polarization of people in many ways is actually creating the magnet that's ultimately bringing us back together so that the healthy, more wise people are inspired to support those that are lost and confused, like your cookbook's doing. And, people like you and I have been doing all our careers. So I think, there's such a beautiful magic to the Tai Chi of life. And I think, having studied Lao Tzu and Taoism and all these things my whole life, you can really get to a certain point where you actually can see the world when it's looking completely and utterly fucked up, yet see, this is just a healing reaction or a cleansing, a detox reaction, or this is the unconscious becoming conscious so that we can, be more conscious of the decisions that we are making and have been making and need to make. I think at the end of the day, though, if God is God, then it has to always work out. It has to work out to what it is, which is unconditional love. And I think there's no other way for God to become aware of itself than to figure out what it isn't on the way to figuring out what it is. And, sometimes you have to figure out what health isn't before you figure out what it is, or, what a drug addiction leads to, which is the isn't of you, to find the is of you. And so that's the kind of strange thing about the Tai Chi symbol is you can put is in the yang symbol and isn't in the yin symbol. And you'll realize that for everything that is, there's an equal and opposite polarity. And if you want to understand how to balance those two, you have to transcend to the dotted circle that holds the Tai Chi symbol in its womb, which is Wu Chi, not life, non-being, that which is aware of being. And it is significant because it's aware of being. It's both in, but transcends it. And I think, I don't know, I'm sure you too, as we've aged, we've learned that sometimes you just got to hold the tension of the opposites and just let things be, climb up to the top of a tree and hang out for a while and just watch so you can see enough of the moving pieces to actually begin to digest it, metabolize, assimilate, and then come up with the medicine that brings things back into balance. And I think it takes a while for a lot of us to mature to the point where we don't, ready, fire, aim everything.
Yeah, too true. My wife, Nick, always likes to say, consciousness wants to experience everything.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, or God wants to experience everything without judgment.
God has no choice.
This is true. This is true. And without trying to control aspects of it. And I had a guest on my podcast years ago, and he spoke about, the idea of non-judgment. And, COVID was a great example of this, because in our country, apparently 96% of people took 2 of these injections. And where I reside is, I wish you well on your journey for the choices that you've made, without feeling despair or sadness or anguish. Like, I respect your choices.
I always say, look, you chose the experimental group. I'm the control group. We need each other.
This is very true. And sitting with different medicines over the years, that notion of trust, accept, surrender, unconditional love, let go. Yeah. Stop trying to control everyone, even yourself. Just observe it and express yourself in the way that you love to express yourself. And for me, I believe that's my perception of what it means to be human. We have these curiosities that bring about our passion. For me, it's surfing. For my wife, it's being with the horses and serving tea. And one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given is find the things that bring you joy and do them as often as you can.
Amen.
And be selfish about it and selfless about it. Why deny yourself the pleasure in this existence to not do the things that bring you joy? Because if you're vibrating with a beautiful frequency from doing the things that you love to do, it will have a flow-on effect.
Of course,
for
it
people
does.
around you.
No question.
So that brings us back to why I did the book. So
yeah, good.
I don't believe I have a purpose per se, like a career purpose, or I'm here to do this. I just follow my intuition. And at the time, I was like, I feel like it would be a really good idea for me to express myself into a new book at this particular point in time with these people that are moving the needle in this country. And then I let go. I let go of what my expectations are on that. Will I sell a book? Will I sell 1 million books? I don't know, and it doesn't really concern me either way. I have an intention.
Yeah, well, good. Yeah, the thing is, though, Pete, is, a cookbook for parents to feed kids couldn't have come at a more important time. I mean, the children of this planet are our future, and the rates of disease and illness and autism and everything you know about is just unfucking believably, devastatingly high. I mean, we've got a world full of children suffering the diseases of geriatric people, of the 70-year-olds of the planet.
Yeah.
And it's like we have gotten so far from just a natural understanding of our relationship to food and to the spirits of the food and to the planet. And there's a concept that I want to share with you because I think it might be useful to you in the future. And I think it's important for people on the podcast to hear. And this is kind of how my soul speaks to me. But I'm going to preface it by sharing how I teach the difference between spirit and soul to my students. So what I do is I get a shaman's drum and I hit the drum and I say to them, you've all hit a drum like this before, haven't you? And of course they say, yes. I say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to perceive that the skin of the drum, the body of the drum is your soul. It's what's having the experience of being played. When you make music with the drum, it feels the vibration, it lives it out. It's the spirit that is moving your arm and giving you the rhythm and the beat that can bring you into a state of harmony, joy, or celebration, or give you the frequency that will help bring someone's body and chakra systems and energy fields back into harmony. But if a real shaman empties the bone, connects to spirit and says, how can I support this person? And spirit begins to move the drumstick. So spirit moves the stick, but the drum skin is the membrane between the implicate world of spirit, the invisible immeasurable realm of spirit where our highest self and our soul and all souls really live, and the physical where we experience life as soul. So now if you take that analogy, instead of a drum, we've got food. Food is the spiritual membrane where we connect to the earth, where we connect to the sun, the stars, the moon, the water, the elementals, the fairy kingdom, and all of these beautiful things that go into the souls of this food. And so when we eat food consciously and bring it into our body, just like when we bring mushrooms into our body, we know the spirit is going to come upon us, or we drink alcohol and we know the spirits are coming into us. When you really are conscious and you eat a beautiful fresh carrot out of the garden, there's an experience, and it's different than eating a squash or a tomato, because it's a different level of consciousness, a different vibration, a different color, a different shape or geometry, and a different spirit. And so I think one of the things that's missing is food or eating as a spiritual practice where you really honor and worship the beauty and the harmony. The fact that, look, it takes the whole universe to produce food. The sun couldn't be here without the galaxy. The galaxy couldn't be here without the universe. The earth couldn't make food without the moon to regulate the tides, the elements of earth, water, fire, and air, the sun to give light, and the logos of the sun, the intelligence, the plan to unfold on the earth. Without all the other beings that are involved, which is a myriad of them, from the soil to the stars, like all that is concentrated in a peach or an apple or a chicken's body. And so the metaphor that I'm giving is just the way the drum skin is the membrane where spirit meets enough resistance to create vibration. Food is also a membrane where spirit manifests its creativity and gives us the gifts that allow it to live and transform and become human. And to the degree that we're open, we can let the wisdom of the carrots and the birds and the bees and the flowers of the tree speak through us, because that's ultimately what we're made out of anyhow. And so I just think that I just wanted to share with everybody that if you see food as the membrane between the invisible spirit and the visible manifestations of spirit, and you engage that consciously, then you can pay attention to that each food is a form of intelligence, and it's living information, it's energy, it's frequency, it's information. And when we eat the right energy, frequency, and information to support our body, then we gain the wisdom and the intelligence. We realize, wow, turmeric does some magic things when your body's swollen. And boy, this, acerola cherry really is supportive. I haven't had a cold in 2 years since I've been started. So you learn all these little beautiful spirits and how they come to get involved in the party and join the dance. And I think if we really celebrated the farmers that produce free-range, organic, biodynamic type foods, and that they're caring for the soil and caring for the animals, and realized what a sacred practice that is. If you study, biodynamic farming and Steiner's teachings, you realize how sacred and deeply spiritual it is. So anyhow, that's my 2 cents on that membrane concept.
I love it. If we could think about food as exactly as you said, it would definitely change our relationship with that. And then we bring in the beauty or the art and the craft of our ancient ancestors and their trial and error over millennia of using these beautiful ingredients, having these relationships with them, whether it's in Thailand or South America or Russia, United States, Australia, and how they have used these different ingredients in these beautiful marriages to create such a symphony of flavors that are so delicious. You look at places like India, where they do these spice blends. You mentioned turmeric before. They mix fenugreek, cumin, the list goes on and on and on, ginger, garlic. And it might be 20 or 30 ingredients, but they've worked out these beautiful ratios to make the most intoxicating curry paste, which then turns into a curry. And they might do it with wild goat, you know. And if you've ever had goat curry prepared really well or a Jamaican goat curry, like, wow. And you sit in reverence and think about how long were they tinkering with these recipes, and how long have they been handed down from generation to generation. And then, as I was saying before, with my focus on Instagram and the chefs that I follow from around the world, what else is new is being discovered in this day and age. And because we can use all of these ingredients in so many different manipulations or recipes, if you like to call it. And I've stated this before, we could, if we chose to, with all the ingredients that are available to us, the spices, the herbs, the different animals, the different plants that we have access to, we could live for the rest of our lives and never eat the same dish twice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Like, think about that. Like, that's pretty wild that we could have such variety in our life to go on this culinary adventure, and think about what that would do for our spirit, soul, our taste buds, how they would develop, and how we would become a master or masters of taste.
Well, not only that, variety is stability. And when I was writing my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, I started, writing it in 2000. I came across a research paper that was quite shocking. It was a study of how many different foods people eat, and it found that the average person, in a large cross-sectional study, they basically concluded the average person in the United States only eats 10 to 12 foods their entire lifetime.
Wow.
Which is unfrickin' believably dangerous.
Yeah.
For a billion reasons, but wow, crazy stuff. So, yeah, I mean, the other thing that I wanted to throw in there is, you think these cultures been tinkering with these things for a long time, but if you look at how the shaman learned to make ayahuasca and most natural medicines, they learned it from the plants and the trees themselves. So a lot of what we think is our own intuitive insights could very well be the spirits of those plants that we're smelling, tasting, drinking, smoking, and eating, saying, hey, you want help with your neck or your back or your inflammation or your constipation or your inability to digest fats? Here, my buddy over here and that buddy over there, mix us together and watch the magic happen.
Yeah. It's a beautiful dance of nature, and the connection of nature in so many beautiful combinations.
Yeah.
And one's not better than the other, depending on perhaps, as you said, what you need. And you listen, some days my wife and I, we will just eat a beautiful steak with nothing else, like maybe some salt, squeeze a lemon on it. That might be what we feel like eating for that day. And the next day it could be a curry with all of these different spices and vegetables and this, that, and the other. When it's summertime, lean more into the salads, the beef tartars, the raw style fish, the raw style meat, or the very quickly seared. And then in wintertime, when it's cold outside, and I'm in Park City and it's cold outside, I've already told the fellow that I'm staying with tonight, I said, how do you feel about some roast lamb tonight with some roast vegetables for dinner? Because it's cold outside. And he's like, he's out skiing at the moment. He's like, can't wait. So it's about, for me and for many others, it's tapping into not only the climate and the seasons, but also your geography. And if you want to take it a step further, perhaps your heritage, where do your ancestors come from? If they're European descent, are coconuts really a health food for you?
That's what I've been trying to teach people forever, Pete.
Perhaps not,
I tell people grass doesn't grow in ice and plants don't grow in ice. And if your parents come from places where the ground freezes in the winter, vegetarianism's a really bad idea for you. I guarantee you, because I've seen it happen over and over and over again. So, your body will always tell you, you just got to listen to it.
Yeah. And I think it's such a useful tool just to recognize and ask those questions of ourselves on our individual journey. And I think that's why a blanket statement for what anybody should be eating is very dangerous to tell people.
Other than the quality factor.
Correct. Good quality, obviously. But then, some people seem to thrive on carnivore. Some people do seem to thrive on more of a plant-based approach. Some people go paleo, keto. And funnily enough, some people seem to do very well on a standard American diet of junk food and cigarettes and beer, and they live long, healthy, happy lives. Whereas sometimes other people that just eat quality organic food can still suffer disease. So I'm very cautious not to do a blanket statement, but the reason that I did the book with no dairy and no grains or gluten is because it seems, and with Children's Health Defence, they have a lot of children that have been vaccine injured and children on the autism spectrum. And there seems to be enough research from doctors and scientists and researchers and professionals in that space and parents of these children that if they eliminate these certain foods for a period of time, perhaps it's a short period of time, perhaps for others it's the rest of their life. Again, no blanket statements here, that they seem to thrive and survive in a very different way just from taking out these two. Could just be dairy for one of the children. It could be just gluten for one. It could be the combination of two, or it could be some more different types of foods as well. So it's a delicate space to be in to tell people what to eat. So I'm very cautious about that because I would never want to force my opinions or beliefs onto anybody else, but invite them to explore, to create a relationship with themselves, to find out what seems to work best for them. And then and supply them with enough recipes that are delicious. So I do have plant-based recipes. I've got carnivore recipes. I've got the omnivorous recipes from both sides. And then let everybody do what go on the adventure to work out what works for them. And then the other invitation is to be flexible. So we don't get dogmatic belief about a certain way of eating, whether it be veganism or carnivore or paleo or any of these labels, because I learned that the hard way when I was 19. I went all in on a vegan, nearly raw vegan diet for 4 years. And I shouted from the rooftops as a 19-year-old, everybody should be doing this, until I suffered the ill effects of choosing that diet at that particular time for me. Didn't produce the results that I thought that they would. And I held on to that belief until I was so sick that I had to let go and surrender that maybe I haven't got it worked out just yet.
So now you've been compensating by shouting on the roof, hey, everybody, there's more to it than I thought when I was 19 through 22 or 23.
Well, it was a humbling experience for me to go through that process. And it was one of the most valuable lessons that now I choose not to tell anybody what to do or how they should do it, but invite them to use some of the tools and resources that we share without being dogmatic about it. And yeah, I'm writing a book at the moment on the similarities between Bitcoin and ancestral diets, which
that's an interesting concept.
Well, that's what I got here. Hodl your health.
I was wondering what the hell that was standing for. I was like, is that a play on words? That first one, your brain wants to go hold your health.
Yeah, and because Bitcoin I've been fascinated about for the last 5 years since a friend introduced me to it. And there are some pretty powerful similarities when I started to ask that question. Are there similarities between long-term regenerative health and Bitcoin's idea of long-term regenerative wealth? And it's been a fascinating study for me, and that's my next adventure. Speaking at Bitcoin Vegas this year in May and Bitcoin Prague in June in 2025. And because there's no point having money and wealth if you're not healthy.
No,
You know?
that's how most of my clients come to me.
Exactly. And so how do we bridge that idea between ancestral diets? And in the book, I talk about carnivore and paleo and keto and autoimmune paleo and these different ways of looking back at our ancestors. And, because it was all about quality. It was about value. It was about scarcity. It was about energy and efficiency.
Availability.
And when you start to look into the Bitcoin white paper, there's these huge similarities between what Bitcoin offers, which is sovereignty, wealth autonomy. So my intention with the work that I do is an invitation for people to, if they choose to step out of a lot of these current systems that we find ourselves in, whether it be the medical system, the pharmaceutical system, the hospital system, the financial system, and that's a whole other podcast about, and that's some rabbit holes that have really opened my eyes into the whole sort of agenda that's at play.
Oh, hell yeah.
And so it's exciting times. Again, what I said before, modern technology, ancient wisdom.
Yeah.
How do we keep that in harmony or balance and not lose ourselves to either of them, but embrace everything in a holistic manner? So when we don't have blinkers on.
I think morality is the glue that holds those two together in a healthy way.
Yeah.
When I say morality, I mean life affirmative choices.
Yeah. And where we take full accountability and ownership and responsibility over our own actions instead of outsourcing them to these systems that have been created to, I don't want to think they're nefarious systems as such. They've just become these money-making organizations and industries. And now there seems to be solutions popping up, health solutions, wealth solutions, or financial solutions. And we're witnessing that with media as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mainstream media has had this stranglehold over the way that we have had information over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 decades. And now we're seeing that rapidly start to dissolve and crumble, and new forms of media like podcasts, obviously, but people like Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, just to name a few, they're eclipsing the old system.
Totally. They're giving it an enema.
Oh, yeah. A much needed enema.
A much needed enema, yeah. And thank the Lord, or more people would have gotten vaccinated than they did if it wasn't for those sources of media, some of which you mentioned. But, just like we only have 10 to 12 foods being eaten by the average American, when you have only like 5 or 6 channels owned by 6 corporations, you're in dangerous trouble. That's, and as we saw with COVID, you could turn on any channel in any country and they were saying exactly the same things, which turned out to be scripted by none other than Bill Gates. Mm-hmm. And so there you have monocropping of the mind of humanity. And that's just a great way to destroy everything. And if it wasn't for the alternative media streams, it could have been much more devastating.
Yeah. And I believe that COVID had to happen for this to happen.
I think so too.
I think for this transition.
And I think COVID is really the initiation into adulthood, where people have to stop trusting in big organizations and doctors and everybody to fix them and fix the problems of the world, and get out there and participate, and that's, we have to act like adults. And, I say an adult is someone who says what they mean and means what they say and follows through on it. And, we just have Ken Wilber shows over and over again in his research that about 70% of the world population at any age is still in the child archetype. And that's a formula for mind control, disaster manipulation, and all the things that we've been going through. If people can't, to be an adult, you have to take responsibility for your faculty of discernment and have a clear sense of values. Your ego's not intact until you know what yes and no mean, right and wrong are, should and shouldn't, will and won't. And, individuation, as Jung laid it out, is a process of not only becoming an adult, but becoming more conscious of the unconscious and using the relationship and the powers of the unconscious to not only heal, but to expand the dimension of the ego or consciousness vastly through a deep spiritual connection to the unconscious. And the unconscious is the wisdom of creation itself. It's it is the habits that God has of making stars, planets, moons, people, places, and things. And it's vast. And I think so individuation is not only accepting responsibility for yourself as an adult, and becoming a contributor to family, society, world, but it is a spiritual evolution in which you come to the realization that the ego is not the best driver, and it's made out of almost entirely out of other people's ideas. So when you start, coming into a place of deep, intimate relationship with your soul and your spirit and novel creations, be it what you eat for a given meal or what you put in your water or how you condition your water or how you have sex, or how you mix up your herbs when you blow a smoke or all of it. It's just like, I think when the pain teacher shows up, there's always a quickening of consciousness. And that's, I think it's just important that when we realize that things aren't working and it's causing us pain, whether it be a lack of freedom or we're not stepping into our sovereignty and there's a cost to that, or we're looking in the mirror and seeing our body break down, that's the pain teacher showing you where to pay attention. And I think we've been going through a period of initiation, really, where we have to decide, are we going to let rich people, largely men, determine our future, or are we going to make decisions for ourselves and say no to things that are just not healthy for us or the planet? And I think we're the last 4.5, 5 years has really just been a beautiful up-leveling of consciousness around the globe. And anybody that hasn't been up-leveled, well, they're probably on their way to meet God anyhow.
Beautifully said, my friend.
Thanks.
And it reminds me of Kelly Brogan. I think it came up with this terminology, or I know she's used it before, as a wonderful person and friend. She says the reliance on mummy medicine and daddy government.
Right.
As you said, the child adult, we have, because we have unresolved trauma, a lot of us, with our parents or our parental figures or guardians, that we just transfer that reliance onto, because we haven't had the initiation from child to adult. We transfer the responsibility to look after us to mummy medicine and daddy government, or the daddy financial systems that are out there. And I think that's, you mentioned something about the pain teacher as well. And to go back to one of your earlier questions, why the book, why now, why this type of work, is I hold this belief and dream that perhaps in the future we won't have to go through these pain teachings as often. And I believe prevention is such an overlooked philosophy in regards to health, because you would know this, and you just mentioned it, that a lot of the people that come to you are in pain and suffering.
Oh, yeah.
So can we get to a point where the catalyst for change isn't to hit rock bottom and be in that pain and suffering? I hold on to that belief that prevention, without having to go through these huge ups and downs, even though the ups and downs are great teachers for us, but what would it be like if people looked after their health? Because all of these systems that we've been talking about would have to change and adapt and either downsize or dissolve or evolve into better versions of themselves. Some may, some may not, and how do we get to understand that? And even prevention is a bit of a icky word, but we'll use it in this context. How do we make that sexy?
Yeah, I think, well, there's an old saying that's really appropriate right now. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way you make it sexy is you make it part of a mindfulness practice, an awareness practice, and a more intimate relationship with your body, knowing that your mind and your emotions can be no more healthy or stable than your body, because those two are fused together like water and wet and yin and yang and heads and tails of a coin. And, we came here as souls for a physical experience because it's a concentrated concentration of every aspect of experience. And it's a great learning and growing opportunity. I mean, metaphysically speaking, I was listening to one spiritual teacher on a podcast who said something quite wise. And they said, we probably get as much learning and growth in one human lifetime, call it 78 years on average, as a soul does in the afterlife in 1,000 years, due to the polarity and the intensity and the concentration and the illusion of separation that you don't have in the afterlife. And, that made me meditate on that. And I thought, that's probably quite realistic. It's like, we really come here for like the full ride, man, like dive into it, and since the soul can't die, the soul's untouchable at its core level. I mean, the soul is the intelligent energy of God. Only God can give a soul. So the soul is God within. You can't kill God. God can't even kill God. So, when you realize that we're really coming here for the full Monty, no matter what that is, God says yes to it all, because that's how consciousness evolves. You want to be sick, fat, and broken? That'll be quite an experience. You'll never forget it. You want to be healthy and vital and, be a gymnast or a downhill skier or a motocross racer or a porn star or whatever. I mean, God says, get it on. Let's do it, man.
Yeah. I was just skiing a couple of hours ago, and I'm here with a friend, and we were skiing with a local that's one of the best on the mountain. And I'm an okay skier. And I was asking him as we were going up the chairlift, because he goes, we're going to go do that run over there. It's the Black Diamond. And I just asked him some tips. I said, give me your experience on how I can do this better. You've watched me ski a few runs today. And he said, you need to lean in.
I was just going to say, I bet you he told you to lean in, because that's what Penny tells me all the time.
Because you got to lean in. The steeper it is, the more you have to. Your natural reaction is hesitation and lean back. Yeah. He says that's where you'll fuck up.
Yeah.
He goes, you have to override the mind's protection mechanism of safety and just lean in and over your skis. And I did it on this steep black run. And I said to him at the bottom, when I caught up to him, because he's going twice as fast as me, I said, that was awesome. I felt so good on my skis, and just that one little tip built my confidence. So then when we did it again, I was ready for it, just to lean in and go. Can I go faster?
Yeah.
I'm like, I did it. Stoked. I got that experience. God got to experience what it was like for me to lean in.
Well, you see, you're also pointing to something else, and that is that you had a wise elder.
Yes.
And that's what's missing in the world. We've lost our wise elders, and they used to conduct the initiation ceremonies to bring children into adulthood. They're the ones that help the women with their first birth and transition into adulthood. They're the ones that sat with the chief and solved the big problems. They're the ones that had the most life experience. They'd seen the most wars and births and deaths and seasons and droughts and famines and feasts. But, now what we've got is a society of wise elders that think largely about when they can get on their next cruise ship and what drug prescription they're going to have to go get next. And they're, they've kind of blown themselves out of participation. And we've also had a cultural disease, which is old people are useless. They can't do anything. And that's completely and utterly the opposite of how native cultures functioned. I mean, wise elders, medicine women, shaman, people that had life experience were venerated because of that. And I think, I'm 63 now, and I know a lot of my friends are kind of in my age group between 50 and, maybe a little older than me, but they're doing their best to teach people how to lean in, and just like you said, it only takes a little tip, like leaning in, you get more ski on the ground, which gives you more control. And if you lean into life and really participate in it, you get more life back.
And it comes down to asking the question, like for me, sitting on the chairlift, I could have not asked that question.
Yeah. But you might still be on the run, on your back.
But being vulnerable and asking something of somebody else, I want to gain your experience in this because I want to evolve and improve so that I have a better experience and I can go ski other parts of the mountain rather than the same old routine of the same slope, because again, the variety is what keeps us young and excited, I believe, whether it's variety in food, variety of travel destinations, variety of music that we get to listen to, variety of whatever it may be. Variety is pretty cool, because I've noticed that, sometimes I've observed when people get stuck in a routine for too long, that flexibility goes out of their life. It's just like, no, I need to do this now because this is my routine and this keeps me safe, instead of the idea of randomness and uncertainty. And I've learned to really thrive on the uncertainty principle.
Yeah. If you don't, it'll get you.
Once upon a time, I used to be able to, and this might sound wacky, but I used to be able to predict so much of my life. I could see it. And it got to the point where the magic had gone for me, because it was, I could, if I do this is the path. And I think it was after sitting with some medicines, Toad in particular, that I wanted to take away that aspect of me, because I felt like that was keeping me safe by knowing the future. Whereas now I do my best to not try to plan every aspect of my life and just lean into the uncertainty, even if it offers the pain teacher. I'm still going through these processes. Well, the pain teacher does show up, whether it might be financial or this, that, and the other. But for me, it's been one of the greatest revelations for me just to let go of trying to plan my fucking life out, because I used to do that. What is it like not to plan everything out and just still be creative, still manifest, co-create with myself and for others, but just letting go of the certainty of something will happen?
Yeah. Well, there's an old saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell her you've got a plan.
I like that one. That's a great one.
What do you reach for when you need a snack to keep you going between meals? Here at the Chek household, we always have a selection of Paleo Valley's meat sticks close at hand. They are made from 100% grass-fed beef and venison or pasture-raised pork and chicken, and they contain organic spices to create flavors like buffalo-style chicken, jalapeno beef, and maple bacon pork. Paleo Valley's meat sticks are naturally fermented, so they are shelf-stable without the use of icky chemicals or questionable ingredients. Did you know that virtually all other similar snack stick products use GMO corn-based citric acid encapsulated in hydrogenated oils to process their products? Who wants to be eating that? Paleo Valley's meat sticks taste amazing and are good for you too, packed with protein and also gut-friendly probiotics created by the fermentation process. Paleo Valley sources from USA family farmers focused on using regenerative farming practices. This type of farming helps produce more nutrient-dense, nourishing meat while supporting the local ecosystem by helping rebuild topsoil, improve biodiversity, and sequester carbon while avoiding the use of chemicals and pesticides. So if you're looking for a snack that is good for you, good for the environment, and good for your budget, go to paleovalley.com/Chek15 and get 15% off your order of Paleo Valley meat sticks. That's paleovalley.com/CHEK15 for a 15% savings. Snack and be happy.
Pete, lovely dialogue. It's so great to connect with you, man, and have a chance to rap. I have, a handful of deep, lovely, beautiful friends, but we're all over the world. So when I get a chance to sit down with someone like you and share the love, it's always nourishing. So thank you for being so tasty.
My pleasure. You too, mate.
Thanks, bud. My next question I wanted to ask you, being someone who would know this, what are the 3 to 4 most common myths or misconceptions among the general public regarding feeding children? And what are their sources? Where do you think these myths are coming from, and what are the consequences? I think we talked about one of them, which is the food pyramid.
Yeah, that's a big question. 3 or 4 myths. Wow.
And that's, of course, using myth in the wrong sense, because myth means story, but like, what I mean, like the kind of like the false narratives or stories that mislead people with the feeding of children.
Yeah, I think it's wow. We can talk about this for hours, but I'd like to take as much information and wisdom as we've discussed so far from our ancestors, our hunter-gatherer ancestors, our great-great-grandparents and beyond. Mm-hmm. And, I'll give you a classic example. My wife, Nick, she was born in New Zealand, and she tells me about the first solid food that was introduced to her as a baby, going back 40-something years ago.
Widgety grubs?
No. It was brains, lamb brains.
Beautiful. That's great stuff, man.
Like, and you think about something like that, the organ meats and the offal that have been part of all the different cultures' diets since hunting was discovered or a necessity, and just how we would hunt and gather.
And there's a lot about that, by the way, in Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price.
Yeah, the ultimate handbook.
Yeah, and he even talks about how I don't know if it was scurvy, one of the diseases. The natives, I believe it was Vancouver Island or up north. But whenever they would kill a deer or a moose or an elk, they would divide the adrenal glands up amongst the family. They would cut it into sections. So if there was 4, they would divide it in 4. They'd each eat a piece, and that was enough to protect them. I mean, something so beautiful. And there's something that they had to have learned by paying attention. There was something about those adrenal glands that really fed people. And it's interesting, too, on that note, Francis Marion Pottinger did studies where he took glands from different regions of the body, be it the pancreas, any of the glands, the adrenals, desiccated them, and then put radio markers in them and had people eat them. And he found out something quite marvelous. Every single time the tissue, the byproduct of the metabolism, digestion, assimilation, the breakdown of those products went right to the exact region in that body that it came from in the animal's body. So if you ate adrenals, it went to rebuilding your adrenals. If you ate thymus, it went to your thymus. If you ate thyroid, it went to your thyroid. If you ate pancreas, it went to your pancreas. And this goes back, I'm sure you're aware of this. There's an old Egyptian philosophy that says that the shape of the food will feed the part of your body that it correlates to. So kidney beans support the kidneys. Things that look like brains feed the brains, etc. And I not long ago came across a scientific research paper that investigated that and found that it was true.
Yeah.
You know,
Funny that, hey?
Yeah. And so, so there's like some native wisdom right there that's just so beautiful and so profound. And my next note on that interjection is that we are so dangerously misled by educational institutions. We are understudied. People are just reading what everybody else says. They're not going out and learning by exploring and getting involved and talking to experts that really know. It's just all intellectual head fucking being pawned off as education. And I can't tell you how many professors I've encountered in debates and in conferences that are professors of things like biomechanics, but they don't even lift weights. But here they are on stage teaching the biomechanics of a clean and jerk. It's like, obviously you don't lift weights because you would know that what you're saying is not how it works.
Yeah.
And I actually raised my hand once in England in a big conference, and this guy was doing exactly that. And I said to him, look me in the eyes and tell me how many of the lifts you've ever done in your own life that you're talking about right now. Well, it turned out the answer was none. You know, and that's the problem with our education system. And Donald Trump just announced that he's abolishing the education system. I just saw the news this morning.
Yeah. So it goes back to, as you said, leaning in to some ancient wisdom. Brains, for instance, as a wonderful food to feed growing babies, you know, and they're going on to their first foods, these organ meats, you know. And if we look back in time, our great-grandparents knew this information. They didn't need to be part of a tribe or hunter-gatherer society. It's just they worked out what is great for us, for our human biology, and to help us grow strong. And so the myth would be because they have these cereal-type foods that they like to give to children, which... You know, what are they really offering that child for developmental growth? You know,
nothing.
Of the brain, of the body.
Very little of what it needs.
Very, very
Fat
little.
Is so critical.
Yeah, so that's a myth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it needs to be low fat, and we can talk about infant formulas, for instance. And you know, we came under quite heavy scrutiny many years back when I released a book called Bubba Yum Yum with a naturopath friend of mine, Helen Patteran, and Charlotte Carr, who was a mother of a child on the autism spectrum. So
Helen's been a student and client of mine.
Yeah, Helen's great. Yeah. No doubt she'd love to say hello. Yeah. And we released this book called Bubba Yum Yum, and it was quite an intensive book with pre-planning for pregnancy, because that's often overlooked. You know, the health of the mother and father when they go to conceive and then through the pregnancy definitely has a direct correlation to the health of the infant. I mean, it's common sense when you really think about it. And when we look at ancient cultures like Weston A. Price had done, they noticed and they observed that preparation was done for the parents that were going to conceive a child, to make sure that the child had the best opportunity to thrive when it was born. So the low-fat movement and then infant formulas. So we came under scrutiny we borrowed a recipe from Sally Fallon's work, who was the president of the Weston A. Price Foundation, and her book, Nourishing Traditions. Yep. She had a recipe in there for children that couldn't take on breast milk. And in our book, we said breast milk is best, and we went through the whole reason why. Oh, yeah, it did. So the headline became, Pete Evans wants to feed your child bone broth instead of breast milk. You know, that's how the media manipulates something.
Of course, yeah.
And then that book was destroyed a week before publication because they had threatening legal letters from the Dietitians Association in this country. So the publisher got scared, destroyed the books before they went out to publish. I self-published the book 6 months later, never received an email, never received a threatening letter, never received anything.
I saw the book. I think I have it in my library. Helen might have given me a copy of it. She
probably did. So there's definitely, and I just saw 2 days ago Bobby doing a talk, a statement about how they're going to investigate infant formula to make sure that what's in there is not causing harm, detrimental harm to a growing child. So, and I understand convenience for people using infant formula and this, that, and the other. And again, I'm not here to judge anyone on their journey.
Just inform.
Just inform, yeah. So what other myths are there?
But before you go on, I wanted to share something with you. I don't know if we talked about this in our last podcast together. When I was writing my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, I was doing a lot of research and I was looking into all sorts of stuff, including breastfeeding and infant formulas. And I came across a report that shocked me and saddened me deeply. And it came from Guatemala. And Guatemala had a real strong breastfeeding culture until Gerber set up a factory there. And then what they did is they spent millions of dollars in propaganda to convince the mothers that breastfeeding was not as healthy as Gerber baby food formulas. And they ran into trouble with the Guatemalan government because they had found through observation and years of seeing what happened when mothers did not breastfeed, that it was damaging the children. And so they actually passed a law saying that you could not try to convince people not to breastfeed.
Wow.
Gerber sued the government of Guatemala and overturned the law and was then able to legally enforce their propaganda, which led to a progressive destruction of the children through malnutrition and all the other stuff because, Gerber baby formulas, I wouldn't give it to an enemy.
No.
But it just goes to show you how corporate greed and manipulation can create a lot of problems. And it brings up a point. There's a book called The Philosophy of Science by J.S. Hollandane that I've got somewhere in my library. And he says something pretty profound in there. He says, a little bit of nonsense repeated regularly for just 10 years can wipe out 100 years of truth. And that's very true. But I also tell my students, if that's true, you realize that a little bit of truth repeated regularly for just 10 years can wipe out 100 years of nonsense. And that's your job, to eat, sleep, breathe, and shit the truth so everyone can see what it looks like walking around. And if we all get together and repeat little chunks of truth and demonstrate the authentic expression of that truth as our living reality, as our gift to the world, we can wipe out 100 years of nonsense. And I think that's what COVID really ushered in, is the awareness that those of us that wear the truth can share the truth and wipe out the nonsense that led to the myths we're talking about.
Yeah, beautifully said. Agree 100%. So one of the other myths is that children are fussy eaters. Sometimes, this might be a blanket statement, but show me a fussy child and no doubt they've got fussy parents, but I don't like to say that because I don't think it's 100% accurate, but I do believe that you were talking about earlier, the variety. So if we can start a child early when they're starting to experiment with different types of foods, they have it develops their palate.
Yeah.
And there's I don't like to quote science because obviously there's a big question mark over the word science these days. But there is research that shows if you present a new food to a child, sometimes it might take 10, 15, 20 attempts for them to taste it until they develop a love for that food or an appreciation for that new flavor. And I witnessed that myself as a fussy child. I was a fussy child, and to confront my fears, I chose a career in the culinary arts.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I didn't know it back then, but looking back, it's like, you were such a fussy child that
you wanted to make sure you could get what you want.
Your transition to face your fears around certain foods was the decision to become a professional chef, because as a professional chef, we have to learn how to appreciate delicious ingredients from all around the world and different parts of the animal. So for me, eating my first liver or brain or bone marrow or blood sausage or kidney, for instance, or sweetbread or oyster, was, I have to tell the truth here, I did not like those experiences the first time that those new foods were introduced to me, even as an 18, 19, 20-year-old. But I persevered with it because, one, I wanted to become a really good cook or a great chef. The only way I was going to do that was to learn to appreciate this. And I was told, just persevere, keep trying, keep experimenting, and you will get to that point where these foods, and I'm 52 this year, those foods that I despised as a child are my favorite foods to gravitate towards these days. The bone marrow, the kidneys, the brains, the sweetbreads, the oysters, the mussels, these exotic type foods that our ancient ancestors loved and had worked out ways to prepare them.
I think that's the difference too, Pete, between listening to the instincts of the body and the intellect. Those two, a great example is cold baths. Like, so many people I introduce to the cold bath have 1,000 excuses of why they're not going to like it and how bad the cold is and blah, blah, blah. And I say, how about doing me a favor for 1 minute? Look, you just watched me lay in there for 8 minutes. I'm standing right here in front of you. I'm fine. It's just water. How about giving yourself a minute and dropping down into your body and with the question, do you like this, dear body? And anybody that can get out of their head and just listen to their body gets out of that and goes, wow, I feel so much better. It's amazing. I can't believe I had all these fears about it and blah, blah, blah. But the point is that when we were more connected to the earth as a species, our instincts were what drove us. The instinct to thirst brings you to water. The instinct to poop makes you squat. The instinct for sex grows the race, etc. But once the intellect starts getting in the way, we have problems. And I've observed with my own children, which I have three. My oldest son's 45. I've got a 4-year-old grandson with him. And then I've got Zoe, who's 5, and Mana, who's 9. But we could give them anything when they were between birth and when they first started eating solid foods and about 4 years old. And one of my friends was over one day when the dogs caught a couple of squirrels, because we got 1 billion squirrels here. And my gardener and landscaper, Freddie, who's a Mexican guy my age, he said, those things taste really good if you cook them up. So we said, well, let's try it. So the girls roasted up some squirrel, and one of them spontaneously said to the kids, would you like to try one of the squirrel's eyeballs? And they, yes. And they loved them, man. So now whenever we talk about squirrel, they're like, can we have the eyeballs?
I love
right?
it.
So see, my point is, if you would have waited till they were 10 to try that, they may not have become aware that there's a lot of magic in these foods, but people's minds get in the way. But if you were to ask your body if it wanted some eyeball or some brain or some kidney or some liver, it would say absolutely.
Yeah. All you need to do is go to a Chinese restaurant and be around Chinese people when they're eating a whole fish or whatever it may be. They're eating the eyeballs out of the fish. Like they fight over it because they know that that's one of the best parts, or the jaw or the cheek or of that, or the brains. Or it's just perception and cultural. And how do we step out of that? And I'm a great example of somebody going from fussy to I love it all. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. That's always my take on this. And the same thing. And one of the other myths is that cooking is a chore, and it needs to be hard, and it's not an enjoyable process. So I guess the invitation I have for people, the same thing, is it can be one of the most beautiful gifts that you can give yourself and to your family or friends, or if you're living by yourself, self-nourishment, self-love, daily, if you choose to eat daily, or a couple of times a day, whatever it is that you're on your journey with, the amount of times you eat. But instead of seeing it as a chore, seeing it as a gift. And then if you're not a great cook and you're inexperienced in it, or a beginner, depending on where you are on your journey, again, know that through repetition and practice and experimentation and curiosity and opening your heart into learning a new skill, and it's one of the ultimate life skills. And it is one of the reasons I chose this as a career, because I didn't have that life skill as a teenager. And I looked at the professions that were out there that I could go into, whether it be a plumber or a mechanic or a builder or academic. And cooking for me ticks so many boxes as a life skill to learn, because I knew that once I got the basics, that I would then be able to use this for the rest of my life, not only for myself, but for my friends and family. If I was fortunate enough to have a family, which I have, and use that simple skill of cooking. And it doesn't need to be difficult. Like I told you before, my wife and I will cook a beautiful steak or some sausages over the open fire. And seriously, it's once you've got the fire or the frying pan hot, it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes maximum if you just want a simple meal.
Yeah, and I think simple meals are important because, there's so much complexity and chemistry in the foods that most people are eating today, that when you keep meals simple to like one flesh food and maybe one or two vegetable foods, it's a lot easier to discern what it is that's causing stress reactions in your body. But if you're eating all sorts of stuff all day long, you got way too many items in the fire. You can't tell where it's coming from. So one of the first things I have to do with unhealthy people is simplify their meals down to just 3 foods, 1 meat and two vegetables. And then it's easier to track. And
great approach.
It's very simple. I use the 4-day rotation diet approach, and it's the most accurate to this day because even lab tested are still very unreliable. But the other thing is, cooking really brings you into a much more intimate relationship with food. You're touching it. You're paying attention to it. People are likely to see, if they're not buying really high quality meats, for example, there's a lot of tumors and nasty stuff in meat, or parasites and worms in fish that, they may not have even realized the difference between good food and bad food. But when you start handling it and you're intimate with it, you start really noticing who's providing you good food and who's not.
Yeah. So the art of cooking, anybody can develop that relationship with, and then, building up your culinary repertoire. You mentioned the study of 10 or 12 different foods that people eat, and one of the encouragements that I give to people is buy a different spice every week. At the end of the year, you'll have 52 different spices and or spice blends that are in your pantry. You don't need to buy a lot of it, a small little organic, inexpensive little glass jar of these beautiful spices like cumin, ground coriander seed, whatever it may be. And the spice blends from the Middle East or India, like we discussed earlier, and just start to see how just that the addition of one spice or a blend of spices onto a piece of fish, into a pan. Like, I love good quality Japanese curry powder. It's got its own blend different from Indian curry powder, but I've got different curry powders and a beautiful piece of white fish, wild caught with some Japanese curry powder just sprinkled on it, then pan fried with a squeeze of lemon or some lime on the side, or maybe a good quality aioli or mayonnaise, maybe one vegetable or some arugula leaves or rocket leaves. Damn, you got a really tasty, delicious meal instead of it just being salt and pepper on the fish. And it's just takes the same amount of time, but that flavor profile, it creates memories.
It also gives a lot of nutritional diversity as well. I mean, spices are often very, very potent sources of nutrition, and it doesn't take a lot to make a difference in somebody's health profile. People are so nutritionally deficient. Just by the addition of spices, you can put quite a variety in your diet of nutrients from different parts of the world, from different soils. I think it's such a simple way to diversify, and it tastes freaking great. I love spicy everything.
and then we've got the herbs, or herbs, as you say, in this country. And my wife and I, we've gone through the process of planting vegetable gardens, and they take a lot of work to maintain.
Trust me, we know. But there's another form of intimacy.
It's a lot easier to have a couple of cattle on your farm, or some chickens, or raising pigs, than it is, I believe, to have a robust vegetable garden. That's why we love the farmers markets, because there are experts that grow the different fruits and vegetables for us. We have a beautiful orchard that has grapefruits and lemons and limes and oranges, and when they're in bloom, when they're ripe, it's such a treat to be able to pull that off the tree. But herb garden is something, again, you could start with one herb this week, plant it. Could be some Italian parsley, and nurture it. Do it with the children if you've got children, so it becomes this family adventure. Next week, maybe some Vietnamese mint or some Thai basil. You could get the seeds, or you can get little seedlings and plant that. They're inexpensive. And then Japanese shiso leaf, which is our favorite and grows really well in our little pot plants. That just, until you've had Japanese shiso, it just is a game changer.
Wow. I've never had that
flavor. Oh, mate, you got to get some. And if you plant it, I promise you will fall in love. And all of a sudden, you just want to use shiso with everything. You could grow your cilantro, you could grow your tarragon, your Mexican tarragon instead of the French tarragon, and start to play with these flavor profiles. And then obviously, I mean, the list goes on and on. So when we're at home, we have 12 or 15 different herbs that we're growing, or herbs that we're growing, and we'll buy our produce, or our meat, or our seafood, or the chicken, or whatever it is, and have our organic vegetables, or spray-free vegetables. And then every day it's like, what spice or what herb profile, and you can't make a mistake.
No, it's an exploration.
That's the myth that we need to break, that there's a right or wrong way to do it, because everything is trial by error.
Mm-hmm.
Like our ancestors learned how these things blend, and everybody has a different palate. So some people really love citrus. Some people don't like the flavor of cilantro or coriander, as we say in Australia. And they've got a palate that they do not like it for some reason. It's not compatible with them. Perhaps they can grow to like it. I don't know. But so we have to work with what we like, what's available to us, and then just go on this beautiful culinary adventure and experiment. And our bodies will love it. Our minds will start to put the pieces together, just like chefs do. Mm-hmm. And some things work really well, and others are like, oh, maybe I'll put too much of that chili in for the family tonight, and next time I'll try this. And don't take it too seriously, even though it is serious. Have some fun and some play in the kitchen too.
It's you reminded me. Angie and Penny planted some organic chocolate mint.
Oh, yummy.
And man,
that's so good.
What an experience to take that out of the ground and eat that. It was just so freaking awesome. I mean, the flavor of the chocolate and the mint, and it's amazing how a plant can make it taste like chocolate. And it was, oh man, I loved it. We've got a lot of, we got a huge 24 by 48 foot greenhouse. We've got 2 orchards. And the reason we're eating squirrels, because we're in a direct competition with them for everything. They are badass hunters, those guys, and they'll actually reach in with their little claws through the wire mesh we put around everything to protect it, and they will pull through the fence everything they can eat. So when you go to see your trees and stuff, you can see that they have stripped it of everything they can get through the fence. They're very crafty little guys.
We have the white cockatoos that come in every season, and they try to decimate the lemon trees and the grapefruit trees. We wake up in the morning, we can hear them. We're like, quick, go out there and tell them to shoo, but it's great witnessing nature at play and being in that relationship with them. We have this beautiful bird tribe on our property too, with magpies and butcherbirds, which is a type of another species, but similarly related to the magpies.
Magpies are egg hunters.
Oh, and when we're mowing our property, the butcherbirds and the magpies come and sit right next to where we're mowing, because they're getting all the bugs that are fleeing. Mm-hmm. And it's brilliant. But we also hand feed them as well a little bit, because they're wild creatures, but they come to us. We've got there's we've got maybe 8 or 9 now that just come every afternoon, and we give them a tiny little bit of organic mince. We're not disrupting their hunting lifestyle or their wild lifestyle, but they're forming this relationship with us as well. And it's so beautiful to witness. Again, it's food sharing. And I love it. Obviously, it's how wolves became dogs, sharing the food. It's like, whether that was a good experiment or not, it's what we have.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we've got a beautiful dog, and I'm grateful that they've gone through that process. And there's still wolves available.
I don't know if you know this, but crows, ravens, magpies, I forgot the name of that particular type of bird, but they have a brain to body weight ratio that I think slightly exceeds the human being.
Wow.
And the crows have been found to have the most diverse language of the birds. They have approximately 500 words that they've been able to record and track. And they can make very, very sophisticated tools. It's amazing. I saw a documentary showing crows tying knots and making very sophisticated tools for fishing insects out of different types of plants. Quite mind-blowing, So my point is, they're pretty hip to, coming up to us, sharing. And when I was a kid, and my parents lived in Idaho for 3 years, and we had a pig farm, and there was billions of magpies there. So I got to know the magpies pretty well. They're fiery little, they're like the coyote spirit, those guys.
They definitely are. And it's just been such a beautiful adventure living on the land and forming these relationships, whether it be with the trees that we've planted or the animals that co-inhabit our little slice of paradise that's their property. It's not ours. We're just caretakers for a short period of time, but we want to maintain that and create those beautiful relationships. And it's been a blessing. They've taught us a lot too.
Most people nowadays have some trouble with poor blood sugar balance from stress, inactivity, and suboptimal sleep. Or if you're like me, you get too busy and skip a meal and then get so hungry that you crave sugar, stimulants, or a quick fix snack. But the blood sugar roller coaster that this creates is just not good for your body and can cause your cells to become resistant, and that may lead to belly fat, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular diseases, and many more issues. Berberine Breakthrough by Bioptimizers can significantly blunt those sugar cravings and help avoid the energy roller coaster. Stabilizing your blood sugar balance has so many other positive benefits, including supporting a healthy hormone balance, elevating your mood, and keeping brain function healthy. Glucose is also a type of oxidizing sugar, which means high blood glucose can increase oxidative stress and accelerate aging. So if you want to live a long and healthy life, you want to keep your blood sugar even-keeled. Berberine Breakthrough by Bioptimizers is clinically tested to potently normalize blood sugar response and is an invaluable tool in your nutritional toolbox. Spirit Gym with Paul Chek listeners can get 10% off their purchase of Bioptimizers Berberine Breakthrough by going to bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and use the code PAUL10 at checkout. Bioptimizers offer a 365-day best product ever or your money back guarantee, so you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by trying Berberine Breakthrough. That's bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and use the code PAUL10 at checkout for 10% off.
The next thing I wanted to bring up is something I recently addressed in one of my Paul Reacts posts, which people seem to love. And some guy was saying there's no such thing as organic, and he had an organic banana and a commercial banana, and he said, quoting research saying there's no nutritional difference in them and that it's all a scam. And then he cited the USDA, the government official that was put in charge of that. And he says that this has nothing to do with food quality and a bunch of, typical political crap. And then another argument is they all include pesticides now because they're in the rain cycle. They blow across into fields. So there's no such thing as organic, blah, blah, blah. But anyhow, I cited, because when I was writing How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, I kept coming across these studies comparing commercial and organic, saying that there was no difference. And it was really irritating to me because I knew it was propaganda. I'm like, how in the fucking hell? So anyhow, long story made short, I ended up, by happen chance, getting in a food scientist reached out to me who had been studying my articles and work. And he was actually a professor of agriculture, and he gave me a chart, which is right here, showing about, this one was produced in 2016, showing about 100 organic certifications. And lo and behold, when you look at it, guess who owns these organic certifications? How about Snickers, Mars Bar, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Nestle, Kraft, all the junk food manufacturers. And so as I was investigating, I started looking into, like, how in the world are they getting these results? And I read the papers of William A. Albrecht. I've got his collected works of 800 papers. He was a famous soil scientist who basically lost his job for telling the truth about the soil and soil science because the university he was at was funded by, I believe, Monsanto or one of the DuPont chemical, someone making pesticides. And they said, if he keeps publishing those papers, we're not going to fund you anymore. So they ultimated him, and he said, screw it, I'm going to leave. But he had been a professor for 35 years. But anyhow, what I found out, which was quite revealing, is that the way these scientific papers keep getting published, showing there's no difference between conventional and organic, is that these companies like Pepsi and all these other guys will take food, and most of these companies have their financial ties to agricultural programs, just like the drug companies have it in the medical system. And 60% of a medical doctor's education is paid for by drug companies. So they got their hooks in. And so what they do is they will then go to a university, run a research project to determine the nutritional difference between such and such organic food and the conventional food. And what they don't tell you is that the organic farm is owned by them, and it's a bogus organic certification, and it's the same damn food coming from a different field, sold under a different label. And lo and behold, the mystery is solved. And so I came across a paper by the British Soil Association, which is actually quite a good soil association. And they collected 128 research papers looking exactly at the difference between conventional and organic food. I think I can't remember the percentage, but something like 56 or more percentage of them said there was no difference. But what they did was they got a panel of scientists together, and they analyzed each of these studies to see if it was scientifically valid, the way the study was set up, to get the conclusions that they got. Of 128 papers, 100 of them were scientifically invalid. Of the 28 remaining papers, all of them showed significant increases in nutritional density and other related factors with organic food compared to non-organic food. Not to mention animal feeding studies and studies that show on average a person or an animal eating organic food reaches satiety about 30% sooner than they do with commercial food. In other words, you eat about 30% less, which offsets the cost. So anyhow, I bring these things up because most people are getting tricked by, again, propaganda. And that's why I shared that diagram with you. If you want, I can email it to you sometime. Just remind me. But what are your thoughts in regard to organic versus conventional as a chef and as an educator?
I think it's all about flavor and where it comes from and how it's either been raised or grown or harvested. And I mean, it's just common sense. You know, I love the scientific papers that you referenced and them trying to deceive, but then also, you know, the sheer corruption involved in that. You know, I think I think it's important that we get to see that as well. But, you know, I like to bring things back to common sense. And you know that organic generally taste better or always taste better.
Yeah.
And your body knows it.
Sure it
and
does.
you meet the people that are farming or raising these. You go to a farmer's market and you meet the people that are doing it instead of the supermarket or the grocery store where you never meet the people. And there's a vibrancy in these people that have, their purpose or their passion of their lives to create delicious produce for other people.
And animals.
And no doubt themselves. Yeah, and animals as well. And, we have a little local farmer's market about 20 minutes from where we live. And when we go there, we see the lamb farmer. And they're so proud of the lamb.
Yeah.
And they sell lamb tallow, so they also sell the fat, so you could cook with the lamb tallow. But they serve and sell all the different parts of the animal: the lamb liver, the lamb heart, the kid. And they're happy people.
Yeah.
And they look very healthy people.
They're earthy, connected.
So there's something, that gravitates my wife and I and others to see the vibrancy in the produce and just, again, having common sense, knowing that will translate into us. I've been traveling for a week here, and finally I'm in a place that's got a kitchen. But for a week I was on the road and eating out at restaurants, and it wasn't organic, I tell you. And I never want to go into a state of fear over certain things in my life. I'm grateful for nourishment wherever it comes from. But I honestly, in the last week, have felt the effects of eating out instead of being able to cook. And as I said, I'm going to, and that's a compromise that when you do travel, that may come into play. And once upon a time, I used to go into a state of fear about, oh my God, I'm not going to be eating organic and this, that, and the other. And now I just take it with grace. And it's like, oh, well, you're going on this adventure, choose the best quality and the best foods that resonate with you on this journey. And at one point in time, you'll be home again, cooking, and back to that beautiful relationship that you have with some of these products. So, yeah, I definitely think organic is great. Everything 100 years ago was organic, or give or take. Everything was either wild or organic. We didn't have these pesticides, herbicides, growth hormones, vaccines that they put into the animals and the fish, and so now it comes down to conscious purchasing and conscious shopping.
And that's critical, because we're voting with our dollars. We've got more power with our purchase vote than our political power. If
Correct.
You don't feed the dragon, it's going to starve to death. And a lot of these corporate entities are such massive dragons, they have to make billions or they just go out of business. And I think we've just got to starve any of these organizations out, from medical to any of them, financial, all of these organizations that are manipulating and tricking humanity into something less than health, whole being, well-being, truth, and honesty have got to be starved out. But it takes education like this podcast to let people know, we have to be aware of what's life affirmative and what isn't. And we don't want to put money into, anything that's antagonistic to harmony with nature and harmony with health and well-being. That's one of my biggest, criticisms of the whole vegan movement is the grand majority of vegans are not eating organic food. They're just eating commercial stuff. And without going into a long ado on that, because I've covered it extensively, whenever you're buying from a commercial farm, you are actually killing the birds and the animals all around. But their whole movement is against killing animals. I'm like, you guys obviously haven't researched what happens when you eat commercial food and what you're actually funding with your purchases. So I think it's important for all of us to be aware of all these things, because really we're talking about children here. And if we don't take action now, then the children's future is going to be one of medical dependency and an inability to have agency to co-create in the public sphere. And that means we're in deep shit.
This is true. And I've seen it happen. I mean, we can vote with our dollars. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens over the coming years with Bobby in his position and what will happen with government subsidies, because we know they subsidise the high fructose corn syrup and the cereal growers and the monocrops. And I wonder if there'll be a shift where holistically farmed ranches and farms and organic farms will get these, instead of somebody getting an organic certification, which costs money.
Yeah.
That's just, again, the most bizarre state of the world, that you have to pay more to prove that you're organic, and the people that spray the food with toxic chemicals
don't pay shit.
They don't.
Yeah.
They don't pay shit.
Yeah.
They sometimes they get subsidized for it.
Absolutely.
So I think we're at that pivotal point where things are going to change, and if the government, for instance, not that we need to rely on the government, but obviously there are some benefits by having a government at this particular point in time. Hopefully in the future, it'll be a minimal intrusion into our way of life. But if they could transfer those subsidies out of the monocrop world and big ag into the Joel Salatin method and others for holistically farmed practices, that could have a huge impact to lower the prices of these foods that are non-contaminated, because again, everything comes back to budget availability. And if we do want to eat healthy, if we don't have a big budget for it, then there are solutions to this. The ground beef is a wonderful solution. Organ meats, sardines, some of these lesser known species of seafood that you probably don't see in the fine dining restaurants or in the supermarket. But if you do your research and then go on the adventure and then change your perception as to, once a week we're going to have sardines as a family. Once a week we're going to have some liver as a family.
Anchovies.
A couple of times, we're going to have some ground beef that might have some kidneys put into it or some brain or some heart. And we're going to make a beautiful burger patty with that. Whether we have it with the bun or not, that's for people to decide. I love burger patties, really good bacon, organic eggs, nourishing, filling, maybe a little salad on the side and some pickles or some sauerkraut. You're nourished and your body knows when to stop eating. That's again forming that beautiful relationship between ourselves and our bodies.
Yeah.
I've had enough, instead of eating the 3 tubs of ice cream and still being hungry because we're not filling ourselves with nutrients,
right,
and nourishment.
Just to show you how our purchasing power does have control over corporate monsters. My mother lives in Ashland, Oregon, and they built a McDonald's there. And within 2 years, it went bankrupt because nobody would eat there.
Wow.
And I think that was the first McDonald's in the United States to actually shut down because nobody would eat there.
Yeah, I've never had a problem with fast food industries or businesses like McDonald's. One of my first jobs as a 14-year-old was working at McDonald's, and it taught me some valuable lessons: organization, teamwork, systems, the list goes on and on. Like everything, it was a tool for me to learn and to grow and to take on some of these lessons that I could incorporate. And by having that initiation into a fast food industry that was very well polished with their systems, that allowed me to take those systems into my restaurant career.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very grateful for it.
Well, the systems are better than their food. That's the problem.
Correct. And I read the McDonald's story about Ray Kroc, I think his name was, that started it. Great story to hear about. And once upon a time, they used to cook their fries in beef tallow.
It was originally a real restaurant,
Yeah. And so I never have, because I believe in exactly what you said, because we have people out there campaigning, fast food, we've got to shut this down. It's like, well, no, we're taking away the power from the individual on their personal journey. They exist. They only exist because people want to purchase their product at this particular point in time on their journey. Perhaps in the future, like you said, more and more will close because people's beliefs will change into, I do not want to feed my children or myself with this product anymore. And as you said, enough people change their trajectory on their journey of health and discovery and education and inspiration, then those industries will either collapse, dissolve, or they'll adapt. And see, I like the idea of I've always pictured, the McDonald's of the future, organic.
Yeah, that's it. It's food quality. If you have healthy food sold by a fast food restaurant, the whole point of a fast food restaurant is convenience, right?
Yeah.
So if you start off with garbage, you end up with garbage. If you start off with good quality food, even if the prices go up, at least you're eating real food. It's good for you. It's good for your family. It's good for the planet because it's coming from real farmers. So I don't think it's the issue of the fast food industry. I think it's the issue of the ethics and morals of the fast food industry, and gouging people and making 10,000% off a hamburger or whatever the hell it is. But just like the drug industry. But I think that I know, for example, Autumn Smith, the founder of Paleo Valley, opened a hamburger joint, I believe in Boulder, and it's all, free range, top notch, cooked in high quality fats. And it's doing really well, but the point is it's the same concept of a burger joint, but it's real food. What a concept. Yeah. Hey, let's do that,
And I think more and more will pop up and someone will crack the code to make it convenient and quality driven without cutting corners, because there's a desire for convenience in this day and age. And I don't disregard that. I think there's a wonderful opportunity for entrepreneurs out there in the food space and the franchise space to really capture this market that is crying out or would really love to have this option available to them. I've spent the last week traveling through your beautiful country here and spent a lot of time in airports and attempting to find something to eat in an airport. That
hard to do.
Wow, yeah, it was an eye opener. That's for sure. I'm not saying that the Australian airports are much better, but there is very little to choose, so you go without. But when I'm going through these airports, I'm like, fuck, there's a great opportunity here. There's a great opportunity here. And I see it,
yeah.
Going back to that thing about how I see things, I can see that playing out, and whether it happens in the next year because Bobby's in there and the education starts and some entrepreneur is just like, this is our chance to infiltrate this market and really create a new enterprise for people. It's going to happen, but whether it happens this year or in 10 years' time, I think it's inevitable.
It is, because people are waking up. And so inevitably, when you wake up, you make wiser choices, and you have, the same people that want to start restaurants will now want to start a restaurant that really feeds people. And it'll find its way out. I think Mother Nature's speaking to everyone that's listening and guiding us. A question I have that's I think is very important is, if a family's on a budget and money's tight, what are the things that you would recommend parents buy that might be on the expensive side? Like, say if a family can't afford to buy 100% organic food, or maybe the prices at the farmer's market are higher than they could handle to feed their whole family. What are the key items that you think parents raising children should invest the money in if they could only afford maybe 2, 3, 4 items from the highest quality?
Yeah, I definitely like what I said before, ground beef, as you called it in this country. I think
ground beef,
in our country we call it mince.
Yeah.
Of whatever it may be. It could be lamb, it could be beef, it could be goat, it could be bison, whatever. And if you can get grass-fed and finished, at least. There's debate out there about how toxic or how detrimental grain-fed beef is. And I'm not an expert on it. I believe the grass-fed finished seems to
It's far better.
Tick a lot of boxes.
A lot of people don't realize this, but if you're gluten sensitive, you will be sensitive exactly as you've eaten gluten to any animal that's eaten grains. that are containing gluten. I have a very restricted diet. I spent months to try to find a farm that raised turkeys and pigs without feeding them grains. And it made a world of difference to my body and to my mind. It's like, because I would react exactly like I've eaten gluten, which makes my head foggy, my belly bloats, I start getting global inflammation. I'm much more achy and susceptible to injury after working out, because global inflammation is nasty shit. But the point I'm making is people don't realize that if you're gluten intolerant, you got to be very careful about any animal that eats the grains, because the gluten fraction of the protein gets into the flesh of the animal.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. So if you are going to buy ground meat, I would suggest the fattier, excuse me, not the lean mince or ground beef that's out there. Get the full fat if you can, because the fat is going to satiate you like the protein is, but the fat is satiating, and fat is flavor. And there's only so much fat, good quality fat, we'll eat with the protein until our bodies and our
satiety,
children, they're like satiety. It's pretty simple. So I love the idea of the ground beef or the ground meat, because as I mentioned, you can turn it into the burger patties, you can do the rissoles, you can do it into a bolognese sauce mix and serve it with some zucchini noodles or some gluten-free noodles if you'd like, or you can do the taco mix and then serve that with, instead of the corn chips, you might do some roasted sweet potato chips and with some avocado on top, or guacamole. So sweet potato is a nice vegetable to include in the diet, because again, it seems to fill us up with satiety as well, and it's a lower carbohydrate intake than, say, white potatoes.
It's fun to eat.
Oh, it's delicious. Great. Yeah, I'm going to cook some tonight with the roast lamb, roast sweet potatoes, roast pumpkin, and seafood, obviously, and organ meats. So organ meats are always something that I encourage people to eat or invite them to explore, however they can get them into the diet. And by putting 5 to 10% of organ meat into your ground beef, it won't change the flavor profile too much. But the key is not to overcook your organ meats. I think that's why people have such an aversion to eating them, because if you overcook liver, it becomes very metallic and overpowering to the palate.
And the texture is cardboard.
Oh, it's terrible. Like if you look at French pate, they only cook the liver till it's rare to medium rare, so it's really blushing pink to turn it into the pate, which is why it is so delicious, because it's sweet instead of that quite iron-rich metallic flavor. Same thing with kidneys, same thing with a lot of meat. And then I would say don't overcook your meat. That's also the key.
I think it's
as chefs, we love rare, medium rare. Obviously, if you've got a brisket or something, brisket is a wonderful dish to cook for a family. And that's the last thing I will say about this. Cook in bulk. Cook in bulk so that a brisket is a classic thing, whether you put it in the smoker or you slow cook it in the oven, because the next day you will have excess or leftover meat that is delicious, sliced and cold, that you can pack for versatile school lunches, work lunches, or if you're just hungry, you've got good quality meat to be able to access, which will, again, satiate you instead of going for the potato chips.
I think one of the key things about organ meats and glandulars is if you're going to eat organ meats, you got to make sure they're coming from an organic source, because if you eat, for example, liver detoxifies the blood of the animal just like it does in us. So it pulls all the toxins out. And so, liver, kidneys, lungs, those are all organs of detoxification. So if you're eating poisoned animals, you're going to be eating a high concentration of poison in the organs. So you've got to go to organic sources to protect yourself from a good idea that doesn't turn out to be so good.
Correct.
The other thing that my own opinion, you're a chef, but I would say if I was coaching, and I have done this countless times, if I'm coaching a family that can't afford a lot of certified organic or high quality organic, whether it's certified or not, but from a farmer that's really farming organically, I say one of the most important things to buy is organic butter, because butter is something we use a lot on a lot of things, and high quality butter has a lot of nutrition in it. It's a great energy source. there's a million things about butter that are good. In fact, it was interesting when we were in Alaska on vacation one year, we did this train ride, which was like one of the original trains built for the miners. And it was like one of the first trains, and they give you a tour and they tell you about all these different, the history of the whole region and the mining sites. And they said to us, when the gold miners would come in, they would go into the cities to stock up, but they would often carry with them 40 to 60 pounds of butter. They said butter was the most important survival food of any of the foods they brought with them, because they found that they could not survive the cold and harsh environment without adequate butter in their diet.
Yeah, a good quality saturated fat is, as we know, as you just said, the key, whether it's from grass-fed or organic butter. Good quality beef tallow, lamb tallow, pork fat if you can find a really good one, duck fat if you can find a really good one, extra virgin olive oil obviously is a beautiful one, coconut oil if you can find it as well. At home, we like to, I like to as a chef, and part of our health regime is to have all those different ones that I listed, and then playing around with, sometimes I'll cook the steak in a little tallow, sometimes I'll do the sweet potatoes with some duck fat, sometimes an Asian dish I'll use coconut oil for, a little stir fry or a curry using coconut oil. Butter is absolutely delicious, and if you have dairy sensitivities, you can use clarified butter, which is called ghee. That butter with seafood with fish is absolutely delicious. It's so satiating. So you've hit the nail on the head there. And then probably the other thing that I'd throw in there is maybe a good quality sauerkraut or kimchi, and you can make that.
That's
at home,
a great idea.
Or you can buy it as well, because that can help to detoxify the body and help to move things and create a much healthier gut microbiome.
And a great source of nutritional diversity.
Oh, it tastes delicious too.
It's so good. It's so energizing. I eat a lot of sauerkraut, kimchi. We're a family that my kids love that stuff. They dig it. They'll just sit there and just eat it right out of the jar, no problem. I'm glad you mentioned that. That one slipped my mind, but those things, and like you say, you can make them quite easy. It's very easy to do. The girls we make our own kombuchas, our own sauerkraut. We got a whole thing going on here. Penny and Angie are very proactive that way, and our kids are super healthy. In fact, just to give you an example of what happens when you feed kids the way we're talking about, I can't remember when it was, maybe a year, if not 2 years ago. Angie did a lot of research to find the best pediatrician for the kids. And this guy had been really promoting organic and stuff. His name's Dr. Sears, but he's been in business for like 50 years. He's written like 20 books. She took Mana and Angie for their annual checkup, and he said to Angie, "Your children are the healthiest children I have ever seen in my career." Wow. And Angie was really amazed, because this guy's got 50 years of experience. And he goes, "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." And so she told him, we own a health institute, and she told him about my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. But it was just great because a doctor was observant enough to actually see the vitality and in the kids, and he said to Angie, "I have worked with a lot of children in my life, but I don't think I've ever seen kids this healthy."
Well, that brings us back to prevention.
Yeah.
That's what you and your family are setting up for the kids.
Yeah.
It's prevention, but in a delicious way that doesn't feel like it's a burden or it's hard to do. It's just your lifestyle that is so beautiful and intoxicating and addictive to the family to grow and thrive.
Well, it's also love. Like, if you understand these things and you love your children, you want to give them the best chance at life, and you don't want their life to be unnecessarily miserable and painful. Life dishes up enough pain as it is. So why would we want to set our kids up for health problems? And then, they're very sensitive to how they look when they go through, their early teens. And if they got pimples and they're fat and they just don't look good and feel good, then they feel insecure about themselves. So I think there's so many psychological and physical things we can do for them to teach them how to eat well and supply what they need to be healthy, it's the greatest gift to all of us, because like I've said, they're our future, and why not set them out there with, with the advantage that they need to navigate the world we have today.
Again, beautifully said. I love you, brother.
Thank you. Love you too. Hey, listen, where can people find your resources or anything else that you want to share as we close out? And if you have any final comments, feel free.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, we're overdue,
friend.
Man.
And thank you to everybody that's listening or watching.
Yeah.
And I hit the nail on the head. Cook with love and laughter is something that I've written in pretty much all of my books as the mantra. You can cook with love and laughter, and then also eat at the same time with love and intention, conscious intention of this beautiful dance that we have with nature, and the way that we can love ourselves through these simple choices to nourish ourselves. I think we can avert so much of the chronic illness and pain that is down the track if we do not look after ourselves. And so cooking is a gift. It's something that anybody can learn and anyone can master. So don't be scared of this. Look at it as a beautiful adventure. If you are a little bit hesitant about this adventure or where you are on your cooking journey.
Food foreplay.
Exactly. I love the way you speak. And if anyone wants to follow Pete Evans, Chef Pete Evans, I'm on Telegram, Instagram.
Great.
Just joined X, and you can go to my website, peteevans.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Pete. And I hope you all enjoyed this amazing episode with Pete and his obviously extensive experience and all the things we've been sharing a dialogue on today. And thank you to my beautiful sponsors for all the amazing products you create to keep us all healthy. And know every time you spend money with my sponsors, they put that money in the hands of biodynamic and organic and free-range farmers to produce their amazing products. So you're supporting yourself, you're supporting the earth, and a little goes to the podcast so I can keep bringing great people like Pete to you guys. Thank you for applying as much of what we shared today in your life, especially with your children, as possible. And let's all work together to make the world a better place for all living beings now and in the future. Om, peace, amen. Aho, great spirit. Thank you, Pete.
Cheers, brother. Love you.
Love you too.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek and today's guest, Pete Evans. Pete's latest book, Healthy Food for Healthy Kids, 120 simple, nourishing, gluten and dairy-free recipes your whole family will love, is now out and available on Amazon.com in both print and Kindle versions. You can also find all his other books on Amazon or on his website at peteevans.com. Check out the retreats that Pete mentioned at evolvesanctuary.com. Connect with him via Instagram and Telegram at Chef Pete Evans, on X at Pete Evans Chef X, and on Facebook at Paleo Chef Pete Evans. Paul invites you to check out his Spirit Gym program and community, where you can share ideas and ask questions about topics discussed in this podcast. There are 3 different levels of membership to fit your budget and lifestyle. You can join in live Q&A sessions with podcast guests, get access to the members forum within the Spirit Gym community and chat with other members, attend weekly virtual meetups with Paul, and study the comprehensive Master Key online program. You can explore the options and subscribe today by going to myspiritgym.com. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.